My name is Gordon Corrigan. I spent most of my adult life in the army. Since I've left the army, I've become a professional historian, and one of the things I do is take battlefield tours for the cultural experience. It's a very difficult question to answer. What is my favourite battlefield? They're all interesting, otherwise one wouldn't go there. But I suppose there have to be two, really. One is Waterloo, and that's a good battlefield because it's very easy to explain to those who have no interest or knowledge of military history. It's a very compact battlefield, and it was all over in one day. The other, from roughly the same time period, is Salamanca. And the great thing about Salamanca is that it's a highly complex military operation carried out when there were no radios and no maps in 1812. And if you were to carry out the same operation today with maps and radios, you'd probably do it in the same way. So it's a fascinating battlefield from that point of view. There are many great military commanders, of course. I suppose the greatest from the ancient time would have to be Hannibal Barca, who commanded a polyglot army, most of whose languages he didn't speak, who probably weren't being paid, a long way from home, up and down the Italian peninsula for nearly 20 years. Extraordinary leader, a man who must have had incredible charisma to keep that bunch of mainly mercenaries going for that length of time when their lines of communication didn't work. Their supply had to come all the way from Tunisia through to Spain over the Alps. So he's obviously one. More modern period, I think General Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, who I believe was the greatest general on any side in the Second World War. He recognised fairly early on that Germany was probably going to lose the war. But he still fought on, he still did his duty. He commanded far more men than any British general has ever commanded. And he comes out of it with his honour and his reputation unsullied. I think guiding's the wrong word, because a guide takes somebody to a battlefield and tells them what happened. I think we're rather different from that. I think what we're into is explaining the background, the context, why it happened, how it happened, and what the results were. Because military history doesn't stand alone. Military history, economic history, political history, social history, they all interpinge. They all rub off on each other. So I think we're looking into much more than just the battle. We want to say what the background is, why it happened, how it happened. And you can really understand one war, provided you understand how the previous war. So one has to have a broad spectrum of understanding of military history in general. Well, the one I remember, which is indelibly engraved on my mind, is arriving in Delhi with a tour and arriving at a very posh hotel, a meeting in the bar, to be told by the barman that they didn't sell alcohol because it was Gandhi's birthday. And I said, well, Gandhi's bloody dead. And they said, but we never serve alcohol on his birthday. That required a bit of swift initiative by the tour manager, who managed to get out and purchase some beer, which we consumed in a private room. And that I will never forget that. I mean, a group of 20-odd people, desperate for a glass of beer after a very long and tiring journey all the way from UK, and they couldn't have any because it was Gandhi's birthday. Very difficult to say which is the most engaging period, because to understand one period you really have to understand the periods that went before. I suppose it would probably be the Napoleonic period, and the reason I say that is that this is a time when one's getting written records all the way down. Now, if you go the previous generation, Marlborough's battles, yes, you got accounts by the officers, but nothing from the other ranks because most of them were illiterate. Move forward 100 years and soldiers were illiterate, or quite a lot of them were. So you've got accounts not just from the generals, also from the regimental officers, and of course from the private soldiers as well. So you can get a really good idea of how it happened and why it happened and what people thought at the time. I'm very fond of India as a country to tour in for a number of reasons. First of all, I don't like being in a country where I can't speak the language. Unfortunately, I'm fluent in Nepali, and Nepali, Hindi and Urdu are all from the same root. So if you speak one, you can operate in the other. Now, my Hindi is not particularly grammatical, but I can communicate and I can talk to people, and that helps. Also, of course, nothing changes very much in India. One goes to battlefields, and they really haven't changed in 200, 300, 400 years. It's a huge country. It's a country of tremendous colour, tremendous things of interest, and of course a tremendous history which goes way back. So yeah, it's a great country to travel, and of course the food is brilliant. The one I want to spend a lot more time on, because I've only had a brief look at it, is Aigospotamoi, which was the final battle in the Peloponnesian War, 404 BC. Now the reason I'm interested in that is that if that battle had gone the other way, and it almost could have, I mean, eventually it's Sparta versus Athens, had it gone the other way, Rome would never have emerged as a world power, and we'd be the result of a Grecian world and not a Roman world, and I think there would have been quite a difference. I think that Stalingrad, the German army didn't have to attack Stalingrad. They could have masked Stalingrad and carried on down into the Caucasus to get the oil. Had they done that, they could have kept the war going for much, much longer than they actually did. They didn't have to take Stalingrad. Political pressure made them do it, and that was the tipping point of the war. So that's the modern biggest military blunder, in my view. Oh, I think without question it's the popular view of the First World War that an army of patriotic young men was led to their deaths by a lot of butchers and bunglers. It simply isn't true. The British Army in the First World War did exceedingly well. It was well led by men who knew their professions, who'd spent a lifetime preparing for it. Douglas Haig was fully and very well qualified to lead the British Expeditionary Force, and even when Lloyd George tried to find somebody else to take over from him, he simply couldn't. But the belief in the public mind is that it was an unnecessary war led by idiots, and that simply isn't true. Historical opinion, I think, has shifted, but we've got a long way to go before we can convince the public.